And so I guess the idea of like, when they're all published in separate magazines and such, like, did you have trouble wrangling them, making them into one collection? So I guess when I asked, seeds for the book, was there a big idea with a capital B, capital I, or was it kind of like they all come together and it's like, okay, these work?
Yeah, the so there was no big idea guiding the collection until I um sort of stumbled into it, I think.
Mhm.
I was like, because I the first story I wrote for this whole collection was actually the title story, Night of the Living
Okay.
Rez. The ending, though, was not the ending that's there now. It was
Mm.
just a completely different ending,
Mm.
very quiet ending. And So I wrote that in 2015, and when I went into my MFA program, I was like, oh, I'll write a story collection. And between 2015 and 2017, when I went into the program, I had written a couple other stories from David's perspective.
Mm.
And so I was like, oh, I'll set the parameters as, okay, I'm going to start writing David's stories when he's very young and move all the way until he's old. Like that was like my vision for the collection. It was just going to move
Mm.
chronological in time.
Mhm.
And I wrote like 15 or 16 stories from David's perspective. And I got to the end and I was like, Fox, like this is not,
Mhm.
this is not the a good collection, because you think of a when you think of it, like there was nothing, even thematically, I don't think there was really anything like, the only similarity was that it was told from the same person over and over again, and,
Sure.
and moved in time. And I could just imagine a reader getting so sick of that, because with a story collection, it's usually you finish one story and you pick up a new one, or
Yeah.
turn the page, it's a completely new story, new
Mhm.
characters, everything. And so I set it aside and I wrote this story, Burn, and which is the opening in Night of the
Yeah.
Living Rez. And I had no intention to make that um have that be D or David. I was so used to writing in David's perspective that I just put the letter D there as a placeholder. I was like, I'll find his name
Ah.
later. And then I was like, what is his name? And then I was like, what if I put two E's after it? And I did. And the moment I saw it on the page, I was like, wait a minute, is this
Yeah.
David all grown up? And then I was like, yes. And then I was like, well, what happened? So then it became, the whole collection came back to life again. And I was like, okay, I
Oh.
need to explore D and Fellas. And the more I wrote those stories, the more I started to see this very, very little subtle, arc, but it was not above the reader's head. It was like below the surface. And it was
Mm.
that question, what happened, right?
Hmm.
What happened to this guy and his family? Um, and once I knew that, I was like, okay, now it'll be easy to order these and organize them. And I think you had mentioned, what was it like, putting them together.
Mhm.
The David stories were pretty easy to put together just because they were already chronological.
Right.
So like I couldn't do much, movement with those. Maybe the ones in the middle I could have, but the D ones I really had to think emotionally. I was like, okay, where, I had to like sort of like go trust my gut and where I was placing them. And then when I strung them all together, it's obviously cutting the redundancies out, what would have appeared in as a
Yeah. Yeah.
single story versus, it being with the whole group. um and so yeah, I just feel like I got lucky. I just
Hmm.
listened to the story and I kept writing until I stopped hearing anything,
Hmm.
and I was like, I think it's done.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. I mean, maybe I'm, reading too much into it, whatever, but like, from David, the formal full name as a kid, and he was, idealistic and such, and, sweet kid with his toy soldiers and all that. And then, D, like,
Yeah.
it could be just like a nickname, like, oh, what's up, Dave? What's up, D? But just kind of
Yep.
like, just a different person, but also, but not, you know.
Yep.
Um, Kind of meta in the story, Food for the Common Cold. I feel like there's a quote that sums up your collection. It's quote, as if all our problems weren't buried cold below, but were actually right there on the surface facing us all. As if all of our problems weren't buried cold below, but we're actually right there on the surface facing us all. I mean, that's a lot of your writing. I mean, there aren't a lot of like, what's the word? I don't know, fireworks and crazy, incredible, whoa actions and moments and events, but there's so much going on under the surface. Fairly commonplace things in the world, but they speak so loudly.
Yeah, I think I was, so interested in, just animating that,
Uh-huh.
that sort of like quotidian life, right? The
Yes.
daily sort of the daily struggles and successes that people, deal with, right?
Mhm.
um and focusing on them as people, right? And they were in Penobscot, they are indigenous, and so it's like
Mhm.
also bringing that to the page as well. But yeah, I think that is a really good quote to sort of like
Yeah.
that encapsulates what the collection's doing.
Mhm. Holy crap, there's a lot of cigarettes, there's a lot of smoking in the book in the collection. Man. I mean, I think David was like 14 or 15, maybe 7. He was like 14 and he's just like, "Hey mom, give me some cigarettes from the store." She's like, "All right." You
Yeah.
know.
Which is what
um
I would do, which is what I did when I was 14,
yeah.
15.
Themes, I mean, to sum up your book is impossible. There's just so much going on, so much greatness, but there's a lot of, kind of like we were just talking about, there's a lot of idleness and just waiting and inaction, but inaction isn't a way action. Fellas, is that how you say the name?
Yeah, fellas.
Yeah. Right. So Fellas and D, like they're waiting to go to school. They're waiting for the porcupine, which they get and they can sell for $20. They're waiting for mom, get me some medicines, what she was saying. And, they're going for their methadone when they're a little bit older, right? And, in a field of stray caterpillars is one story. And Tabitha, right, is like the ex-girlfriend. And it's just like the phone keeps ringing. He doesn't get it. He doesn't answer it. He doesn't move. He doesn't act. He, I don't know if I'm mixing up the stories, right? But he like has a chance. She's basically like, "Hey, come back home. Like we need to talk." And he's like,
Yeah.
"Nah."
Yeah.
Right. And,
Yep.
there's something very important could have happened maybe, but he just, I wonder about inaction. Am I kind of reading that correctly?
Yeah, you definitely are. I think you know action is character, when characters do something that defines who they are,
Mm-hmm.
but also when characters don't do something that shows who they are. And I think in many ways, this inaction and in a lot of these stories with Dee and David and really any of the, I feel like all of the characters at
Yeah.
some point experience some form of inaction. I think
Yeah.
it's representative of perhaps their inability to communicate due to,
Mm-hmm.
tragedy and trauma. I think D in that particular story, when he says no to Tabitha and he doesn't go back home, that's his inability to, you know, form a relationship, perhaps because of the trauma he's experienced, because he's
Mm-hmm.
probably afraid it, things won't work the way they're supposed to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, if she had asked him that question when he was older, maybe it would have been a different answer, right?
Right.
But at that point in time, he's sort of like he can't act, and there are so many moments where people can't act in real life either.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure. You talk about like traumas and legacies for sure. Are themes that come through. There's one really heartbreaking scene where David becomes Robbie, quote
Yeah.
unquote. Robbie was his grandmother's brother,
Yeah.
who she maybe because of some inaction or just being a kid, or it's an accident where he died when he was really young. And David shows some sweet moments where he acts like Robbie for his grandma, or he'll lie to her to make her feel better because there's a dementia. I mean, is that safe to say?
Yeah, dementia, Alzheimer's, something
Right.
like that.
Yeah, going on. Just ideas of like we don't necessarily know all of the traumas, but I mean, people all over the world, we drink to escape, right? Fellas one time literally says he's like, "Hey, my aunt's coming over. She's gonna be crying. Let's go get drunk."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like so straightforward,
Yeah.
right? What are I feel so like naive or whatever. I keep meaning to look it up, but what are pins? Are those like benzos?
Yeah, Klonopin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like grandma has this smirk on her face that I just, it's such a strong image where it's like she's, even with the dementia, it's like she's seeing through David and David sees it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, and she says, be good. And he's just like, what does that mean? Like now, like as I get older, like does she
Yeah.
see me kind of like spiraling, there's one quote that is their problems shaping others, which again, I
Yep.
think is just so much about like legacy and traumas. It gets me thinking about, how many generations back was David's family speaking the native language? Were they pushed off the reservation into these kill the Indian, save the man type of
Yeah.
all these things, right? That aren't necessarily mentioned, but they're there.
Yeah.
they're there for sure. So I wonder, again, sorry to keep saying it, but being fairly young, what how you so well wrote about trauma and legacy without writing directly always about trauma and legacy.
Yeah, I think I mean, one, I'm no stranger to and most people aren't strangers to intergenerational trauma, right? You know,
Mm,
um what we've inherited from our
yeah.
ancestors, that pain that's, part of us that's been carried, biologically into our,
Mm,
DNA basically. And but growing up there was that, but then there was also the fact that I was around alcoholics, I was around drug addicts, I was around gambling addicts, I was around violence, I was around severe substance abuse, I was
mm,
around moments of neglect, I was around a lot of these things that these characters experience. And so for me it was kind of like, well, I know this, you know what I
mm-hmm,
mean? It's like I've experienced it, I've felt that pain. I felt also the goodness that emerges when people come together to try to get over something.
mm,
And so it kind of was sort of like second nature to me. I think that's why it didn't also come across as sort of like this sensationalized,
right.
victimized, trope, that I think gets
Mm,
overused.
mm-hmm. There are all kinds of longings in the book, longings for normalcy. Like, the again the scene, was it the first story or the second story where David has the soldier man? I think it's the second one, right?
Second one, yeah.
Because Burn is about the hair and the freezing.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but his soldier man, and he loses one of them, and he's thinking about it like it's a real person, right? And he's missing his father, of course, and his dad keeps sending them those soldier men. There's Frick, whose name is pretty funny because it sounds like he got his name
Yeah.
from just saying frickin' and
Yeah.
all the time, right?
Yeah.
He's like the new guy. He's the new guy there, and he's not smoothly coming into the family, to say the least, right? And then again, like I talked about with like Tabitha, where even if David wants some sort of normalcy, there's no right choice with Tabitha. If he does say let's stay together, he's not going to be happy, but he's also not going to be happy without that, right?
Yeah.
Balance. Mom says to Frick, quote, "The whole world is off, but you have to regain balance." I wonder how you kept from making the stories like sad, 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 depressing, depressing, and also the opposite, like cheesy and over the top.
Yeah.
Like a balance.
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like I know when when something is too cloy, when something's being too cloying,
Yes,
when it's too
cloying is
overly
good.
sweet. So I always pull back. And I think I know in my gut when, something is, too much in like a negative way. I think just because of what I see and what I don't want to see. We talked at length earlier about this changing landscape, and it's like,
Sure.
I don't want these elements to perform. So I feel like I just instinctually, with practice, moved away from, putting these, making sure everything was balanced out. I think,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't set out to make this book funny. There are funny moments in it,
Yeah.
but like the thing with humor is like if you make somebody laugh, they'll follow you wherever. And
Mm,
I think humor is a big part of the book. I read Burn at the University of Maine, and a colleague there, he was like, there was a Q&A at the end, and he said something. He's like, I didn't realize how funny this story was until you read it.
yeah.
And because I think it's hilarious, like that this guy got his hair stuck in the snow, but at the same time, it's like also that has the other side of the coin where it's like, holy crap. But yeah, I think it was about just finding the humor in some of this stuff, but then also letting some of the stuff just be as it is,
Right.
right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, the You said something about the oh yeah, such a funny collection. I mean, there's some laugh out loud parts. Do you like, even just the way it was described is funny enough, but like, could you tell me the whole joke? Like the one, something about a brown animal wiping his butt with a white. Like, do
Yeah,
you
I
know?
don't I
Is
don't
that a
know
real
the
joke? Like
whole.
a full joke?
I think it is, but like the character, I don't know the full joke. I just feel like there was this joke about a white bear, like a brown bear wiping its ass with a white rabbit. I have no idea where it came from. I don't know if it's a real joke, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'll just say that. But for some reason, maybe I've thought about it. Like when I
Mm,
wrote it in that story, it's like
mm-hmm.
I think it's real now or something.
You know, David in many ways is forced to grow up fast. I mean, there are moments where there are big time role reversals where he's the parent, and some of the other characters, some of the other young characters, they're the parent. David turns off the lights one time when he comes home for his mom. She's kind of like, maybe drunk and like, in the main room, didn't go to bed on purpose. He puts her to bed. He takes Paige and he puts her in like a shed type of place, but he gives her
Yeah.
nice pillows. And how much older is Paige approximately
Uh,
than
Probably
David?
about like 9 or 10 years older
So
than.
that's what I was figuring.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Like I said, even this role reversal where she's talking to her grandma about her dead brother, he's talking to her. Um, and there's the line, fellas and others are saying it. How do we get here? Literally at times, how do we get here? Why the heck are we here? And how do we get out of here? And I feel like that informs a lot of the book. Did you feel like there was like a main essential question, that or another, or is that just one of many? Like, how do we get out of here and how do we get here?
I think that, to be honest, I feel like that and variations of that question are sort of like the main question, because it's like literally it's the thing that jump started my whole idea for
Mm,
the rest of the book. When I discovered D was, oh, what happened to him? How did he get in this situation?
yeah.
And it very much, by the time you read Night of the Living Rez and the name means thunder, like you get this sense, you're like, okay, I know what happened. Like
Mm,
it would explain why the family is this way. um and so like I feel like that moment in Half-Light, the one you just quoted from, how did we get here, how did I get here,
mm-hmm,
is like the guiding question for David and D in this book.
definitely. The second to last story is the title story. Um, how would I pronounce it? Pugwaji's?
uh,
Pugwaji's?
Pugwages.
Pugwaji's. What would be the best analog for that? I mean, they're not quite like, I don't know, children snatchers. Like, how would you?
Yeah, no, they're so Pugwages, I actually believe is it's a pretty common word for a lot of tribes to use it. It's not a Penobscot word. It's I feel like it's an Ojibwe word,
Okay.
um, which means little people. But I think in Penobscot, and I think I put this in the story, they're called Mi'kmaq,
Yes.
and
The
they're
mom had corrected her, I think, him, right? And said, this is what
yeah,
we
yeah,
call
they're
it. Uh-huh.
Mi'kmaq, yeah, and so they're just, I grew up hearing them as little people spirits that would steal things. And so it was, they took the blame for things that went missing. My mom couldn't
Okay.
find her lighter, and she's like, those goddamn pugwages. She
Okay.
couldn't find that $20 bill she had, that was those
Uh-huh.
goddamn pugwages.
Oh.
My friends and I would joke and tease one of our younger friends that there was a pugwagee living near his house, and
Mm.
get them all scared and stuff. But yeah, I don't know what the equivalent would be in English, other than like little people's spirits.
Yeah, no, there doesn't need to be a direct translation, right? I mean, it makes
Yeah,
sense. Is there the connotation? Does the connotation exist for them of like being kind of like mischievous, right? Like not evil, but just like as kids would do, that kind of thing.
yeah, I think Pugwagees are more, or Mi'kmaq, and there might be another word for them too in our language. They're
Like tricksters almost.
Yeah, they're kind of like trickster figures, but I wouldn't necessarily say they're tricksters. I feel like they're just more like you said, mischievous.
Okay.
Whereas I think the word I use in the story, Gugooks, or in the book, Gugooks, are like more of like the bad
Mm.
spirits.
Yeah. So like in that story, I mean, you got the Jordan Peele going where it's like a different type of like, not horror story, but there's a tension for sure, right? There's the TV I don't think there's anybody in the house, but it's what not Night of the Living Dead, which is one of those. Is it Night of the
Night of
Living Dead?
Living Rez, yeah.
But no, but I'm sorry. What was the movie that was playing the zombie movie?
Oh, I think the original Night of the Living
Yeah,
Dead.
yeah, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
There's that going on, and it's dark, and there's just so much uneasiness and tension. And then, of course, without giving away, one of the really formative, horrible, experiences happens, and that family comes together at the end in a horrible way. But we talked about that image of them just holding on for dear life, and it's
Yeah.
really, again with the cameramen who are there filming for a documentary from off the reservation, from out of the area. there's just such an idea of like somebody's watching you and, you know, looking over your shoulder, and you just do a great job building tension. Like, are you a horror movie guy? Are you like, you know, again, it's not classic horror, but I wonder how you were able to achieve that ambiance, that tension.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I would not say I'm a horror writer or even like a horror like person in general. Like, I mean, I like horror movies and stuff. I'm not, you know, I'm not throwing on, you know, Friday the 13th and, you know, all those movies, you know, every Friday night. But I don't know. There was something really alluring about the idea of zombies as like a metaphor in a way. And
Hmm.
actually, one of the questions, and this isn't on the book anywhere in the synopsis, it's on the online synopses.
Hmm.
But the opening of the synopsis reads something like, actually, I'll just
Yeah.
pull it up because I don't want to mess it up. Oh yeah, the original question is, how do the living come back to life?
Hmm.
And you know, throughout the collection, I mean, it is, I wouldn't call D dead, right? But there is this like deadness in a lot of people, and it's like, how do
Hmm.
they restart? How do they come back?
Hmm.
And I feel like that is in and of itself really scary, right? Um, because I've met people who have been in those situations where it's like, are they going to come back, right? Like, are
Hmm.
they going to be okay? And that's some scary stuff. Um, and like, I feel like that juxtaposed with this horror element, I think kind of allowed it to go a little bit deeper.
Hmm.
You know, it used it as maybe an extra like shovel just to keep digging.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of the scariest stories are not over the top, you know, blood and gore. It's just
Yeah.
that's that tension there. I think of like Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? Joyce Carol Oates.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. Just that weird character, the Arnold or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, you know,